Welcome to the What It Takes podcast, where we talk to successful entrepreneurs, leaders, and CEOs across different industries. I'm your host, Darren, and in each episode, we're going to figure out how they got through difficult times, but most importantly, what it really takes to succeed. So whether you're just starting out your career or you're looking to level up your business game, my goal is to give you real insights and practical lessons from people who have achieved what you want. Welcome back to the What It Takes podcast. I'm joined today by Ollie van der Elst. Ollie, welcome to the podcast, my friend. How are you today?
I'm very good, Darren. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You're an entrepreneur. You've built something pretty big in the electric bicycle space. So what do you have today? What is it that you do?
Yeah, so after university, we decided to start a business and we wanted to do something disruptive in the field of transportation, personal transportation. So we started bringing into Ireland some electric micro cars, but that was back in 2007. And we transitioned over to electric bicycles for a variety of reasons. And that was very early into the ebikes or the revolution as it stands. And we were just convinced then and still now that they have a great deal to play when it comes to changing the face of transport, offering alternatives, having the cardio, the fluidity to go from point A to point B every day, whether you work, where you transport goods, kids, and just even if you use it on a leisure basis, it's just a great equalizer, and it's a ton of fun, and it's good for the planet, good for people, good for spirit,
No, I definitely agree with that. The health wise, it's amazing being outside on the bicycle, fresh air, all of that. You currently have, because you recently started up another company in Spain, which is also around the electronic bicycles, but the one you have, because you're mainly focused in, was it Ireland?
Yeah, so Green Air
Green
is
Air.
the one that we started over 15 years ago in Ireland, and it's mostly focused in Ireland. And then we have another project in Spain called Volo.
And what is the main difference between those two?
Well, the markets are very different. So we're more on the Spanish side. It's more experiential. It's more the mountain bike side of things because it's kind of based on it's like a base camp at the foothill of the trails and a cafe included, a community aspect where people mingle and go on rides together. And that's more the Spanish side. And there's a lot of kind of fleet rentals and corporate and tourism. Where in Ireland, we're more traditional in the way we operate, where it's more based on sales and after sales, a mix of B2C, so just retail outlets, and then B2B, where we supply fleets and the servicing that goes with it. So that's quite different. And also the sort of profile of customers is very different in Ireland. It's a lot more about the utility side, so where it is for commuting, or the cargo bike, which is you'll hear that term a few times in this hour, I'd say, because cargo bikes is our obsession, but it's the ability to carry a multitude of kids, replace the car altogether, where it be as a front loader, as a long tail, so behind you, in front of you, like a bucket looking thing in front. Or just the delivery of goods, which we feel is particularly suited for. So you have three-wheelers, two-wheelers, but it is in Ireland more of a utility side to it, and so it's less on the leisure side of things.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, in Spain, you got the weather, you got the community. I know a lot of people that just travel down to Spain just to go on bike rides, right?
Yeah.
I lived in the Canary Islands for a few months, 6 months, and then I would always see people on bikes, like all the time. And when I'm in Europe, you don't have that same, or at least I've not been to Ireland, but I assume it's not the same culture around the leisure side. It's more the practical use of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very linked to infrastructure. So we're more of a kind of urban, suburban proposition in Ireland. So you see pockets where there's really good adoption, tends to be exactly linked with good segregated infrastructure, where people essentially are feeling secure to ride with their most precious assets or their kids.
Yeah.
So in the likes of Spain, you do see a lot of mountain biking and road biking. For the sports side, that they mix in very different environments, but you don't see as much of an emphasis on shifting people away from cars, except for maybe Barcelona or where the sort of shared mobility is big. So less private ownership and more kind of offering the likes of the mopeds and the e-scooters and the bike shares as an option. We're more into the sort of private ownership side of things and believe in that, and then the fleet side.
It's quite incredible what you've built up, Ollie. I want to go back to the beginning, right? You mentioned that you went to university, you studied, you then went on into the automotive industry. But what really motivated you? What sparked your desire to want to be an entrepreneur? Was that something that you've grown up with? Did it come later? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it's hard to put the finger on just one particular element, but I think feeling a bit inadequate in a very conventional world, and I would say doing a few internships in more conventional industries and realizing not sure if this is for me, has always been a driver. I think, like maybe feeling out of place in environments where you just have to be able to project yourself, and the entrepreneur side has started early enough, like the ability to do like little trades, like in Belgium on the beach. We have this lovely tradition where you have basically flower shops. So you create with your own flowers, and then you trade them with a particular type of seashells.
That's
And
amazing.
and obviously you buy low and you sell higher, and you mix. And then when business is kind of slow because you might not be in the great spot on the beach, you tend to go with a bunch of flowers to the next vendor and say, hey, do you want to trade? If I buy from
Yeah.
you, you can buy from me. So I always kind of like that. And yeah, going to do some internships in the States was also a great trigger, because America, for all its flaws, has this ability to believe in anything being possible. And obviously, it's a very trivial sentence, but for a European, where you see more boundaries and social norms, you go to America and you just feel like you have suddenly discovered superpowers, and that anybody would be foolish enough to follow you on whatever journey you decide to take on. So I would say that the university side was great to just basically get a bit of credibility as an individual and develop personally some skills. But more importantly for me was about meeting people, interesting people, and then and by the time the master's was finished, I definitely knew that I needed to explore the entrepreneurship side of things. And that was the
Yes.
same with my now wife, Lisa. So we just decided both that we had done projects together, and that we could run projects together well, and why not taking it into a business.
That's
Sort of
amazing.
idea.
I definitely want to get back to that later, but I want to focus on what you mentioned, right? Like focusing on that conventional path. I think a lot of people can relate to that, where in the West, in America, it's a little bit different, right? What you said. But here in the West, in Europe especially, it's, you go to school, go to university, get a job, right? Get a house, get a mortgage on the house, get a mortgage on the car. This very 9 to 5 stable job throughout your whole life. And I think a lot of people, they go through this journey where they're sort of stuck, right? They don't know how to get out. And do you think that it's ever too late for people who may feel like what you felt at the time to kind of say, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to do something, even in their mid 20s, late 30s? Is it ever too late to kind of break away from that?
I don't think it's ever too late, and I don't think you should ever kind of deny that aspect in you if it's kind of brewing under, because at the end of the day, it's about your personal satisfaction as a human. It's a lot easier when there's not a lot of collaterals. Let's say that you haven't gone through the mortgage yet, if you haven't got kids to feed and to worry about, and you've not created all these impositions for yourself. So I would always think that being a young 20 something is a great time to explore and to learn and to fail better, which is a big aspect, because failure, if we draw parallels between the US and say Europe or Belgium or the different countries, failure is very frowned upon. It's the hard stuff. You don't start again afterwards. Where in the US, it's like, oh, this guy has obviously learned from some experience and will be better the next time around. But that little shift is huge. I can see that a lot of friends would have liked to take that sort of journey, and they didn't. And sometimes they didn't, not because they financially couldn't, but because the social barriers that they felt they were constrained by were too high. And I think that has a lot to play. I mean, simply in social conversations, I was telling you, I think the first chat, how easier it was to just say, for let's say my parents, look, he's got this job in a good bank, which I've seen now. Like, banks have got a slightly different name, but or perception from the outside. But this feeling of safety, and it fits into social conversations, and it's easy for everybody. But then you start to say, well, I'm kind of looking at entrepreneurship and starting this own project, and it'll be throwing a lot of questions. It will certainly not put you in a pigeonhole that they would be totally comfortable with, and that could be often the end of a conversation, because it's like, okay, you sort of threaten my comfort zone. You're going the rogue way, and I'm not quite sure what to make out of it. I think that there's all these social barriers are the tough ones to overcome. But I would just always say, look, you be young and foolish is just a great asset. Like the fact that you don't know how hard things are going to be is a blessing in itself, because you just do it anyway.
It's the journey, right? It's that journey that you go on where you discover all of these things, and it's like you said, you don't know how hard it's going to be. And I can relate to a lot of what you said as well regarding the social norms, because I remember I had a family dinner, and this was right after I had left my job in London, and I said, or this was in the process in my resignation period, and we had a dinner with the rest of the family, and I said, I'm going to quit, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And the reaction was a little bit confused, right? One guy was like, that's a little risky, isn't it? Why don't you want to have a safe job and a good income? And it's like, you gotta bet, you gotta bet on yourself, So I think a lot of people feel that, and I think that's why it's very inspiring to talk to entrepreneurs who've built their own business, because it really shows a lot of courage often, right? When people often forget how much it takes to just break away from those social norms and then choose to do and believe in yourself and go after that. Because you transitioned from studying, you explored the world, I believe you went to India as well.
Yeah, so just after our master's, we decided to look for business ideas, disruptive and sustainable ones, and combine it with a trip to the unknown, to India. I just had made some friendships, some meaningful ones while studying in England. And I was also very curious to see all these guys back in their own environments and see what they were up to. And so we spent a good few months over there looking for ideas. And that's where we encountered a ton of different stuff, but also we discovered a lot about ourselves too, because again, entrepreneurship is about being out of your comfort zone. India is that one country that's going to put you right out of the comfort zone from the minute you step into it, especially if you're going to travel on a budget, which we did. So it was the foundation of a lot of things for us. I mean, our daughter's name is India, so that tells you the importance of the whole thing.
Wow. Yeah.
But we also came across this electric car through a Swiss very good friend of mine who I didn't know but met over there. And then anyway, he just said, look, you guys are looking at doing something very disruptive in the sustainability field. I just came across these really visionary guys out in Bangalore, and they've convinced their family group to start producing micro electric cars for very kind of defined, short, predictable journeys. And we went to see it. It was a eureka moment. Bangalore is a very polluted city, like many Indian cities. And then in the midst of all that noise and chaos and smoke, you saw this little electric car whizzing past, and it couldn't have been more clear that it was the way forward. Now we're talking 2007, so that was like way early on the electric vehicle front. And it was a noddy little thing, certainly a bit of an acquired taste on the design, but the functionality was just mind-boggling to just know that you could just whiz on a charge that was maybe costing 15 cents, and you just plug it in at home when you're asleep, and off you go in the morning. Takes half the footprint of a regular car. You can sort of park it sideways on. We never found out if we were allowed to do that or not, but we did it anyway.
Didn't get any fines, huh?
No. They thought that would be too pathetic.
Yeah.
but yeah, so that was the start of the journey.
And you've mentioned sustainability several times. Obviously, this is really what you're doing today, but at that time, right, where did the focus on sustainability come from? Was that a passion? What drew you into that?
Yeah, I think it was also a bit of a discovery of so we studied in Ireland at the time of the boom times, where a lot of the growth was unsustainable, very much like in the US, with the property side. And I was looking around thinking a lot of this can't carry on. And then we've always been kind of marketeers, and I would say we as Lisa and I. So in terms of having a nose for trends and an understanding of where things are going, I don't think we've ever got that too wrong, but we certainly got that too early. And we just thought, okay, like if you're going to do a product, you're going to have to do it well. Like there's no point in, adding more stuff onto the market that is not worth being on the market in the first place, or not putting a proper mark on. So it was like an implicit concept that we agreed upon very early on, is that it would be a conducting line in what we want to be doing going forwards. So whether it was transport, or we started also like an organic Ayurvedic cosmetic company in India, which was a challenge as well. But also we just wanted to say, okay, well, if it's going to be about well-being and health and so on, you can't be like producing it the wrong way, or just adding a ton of wasteful materials or chemical materials that you could do without. You want to set a trend and be ahead of the curve. So it was taken as to begin with as really the only way to go. And I mean, obviously today it's very much at the core of a lot of strategies for companies. But it was for us, it was just like one guiding principle, that we would just do it on the basis that it would be sustainable. So whatever the project is, and whatever we decide to do in the future, it's always going to be very much it boils down to that, being a change maker for the.
Yeah, so it was a combination of, identifying that trend, seeing that this is going to be the future, as well as a focus on the earth, right? Making sure that you're contributing in that way. It's beautiful. Now you've been to India, right? You've explored, parts of the world, had internships, been to the States. What was then the story behind how you started Green Air? How did that come to be?
So we were in India. Green Air wasn't a thing at that point. We were just kind of thinking of ideas. We came across these cars in the south, in Bangalore. We went back to Ireland. We spoke to people about, actually some politicians, interestingly enough, to see from their point of view where legislation was going towards. And I just remember we were lucky enough to be introduced to a fairly high level one, and in the corridors of power, they were talking of electric cars. It was definitely something in the works. So that had a bit of a magical effect to people, and that allowed us to sort of fund the project, just on the basis that it was kind of externally validated as being a trend that will definitely go places. But that was only the back of a conversation. I'm sure many of those would haven't gone anywhere. But after that, we basically raised the capital we needed through the three F's, friends, fools, and family. And that allowed us to start kind of on a shoestring, especially for the type of activity that we were going to carry out, which is quite capital intensive, like bringing cars. You're working with a car company that doesn't have all the finance abilities that the big ones do. So you're definitely going to do everything guerrilla style. From a marketing point of view, we had a blast kind of doing sort of YouTube videos. Again, it was quite early, but we just thought, okay, we're not going to play this in the same rule book. So let's go with our imagination and just get attention where we could. And that determined where we where we all started. So we were just like, okay, we can't afford a glossy showroom, so let's be stronger online. Let's go to people to try, to get as many test drives as possible. Let's go to the shows and basically bargain to have a space under shows on the basis that we were exciting to have, and not pay the fees that were asked from other sort of exhibitors. So we knew we had a story. The PR side was really our main, because we always said we wouldn't spend any money on advertising, which we now do, but we do it differently. But before, we never did any advertising. So all of it was basically pure PR, which we thought was the best kind of advertising we could get.
Yes.
And that, that was, but it was kind of natural for us because it was out of necessity. Like we just knew that there was no budget to blow on a fancy.
But I think that part right there, I think it's so valuable for people to hear, because you were in a position where you couldn't advertise because you didn't have the capital, but you started to think outside the box. How can I make sure that I market this in the best possible way? Because a lot of people, what they will do is they have a solution and they think, oh, I can't do this yet. And then they try and wait, they hold off, whether it's money or it's a lack of skill or something else, instead of thinking, how can I still make this work, and think a little bit outside the box, which is what you did. And I think this is really the difference between someone who has a passion and the right qualities, the passion for what they're doing, where they're now thinking, how can I get around this? How can I solve this in the best possible way? And you went to people, you did the PR and online and made videos. So the idea that you had when you first got capital, was that for bikes?
No, it was purely for the electric cars. So in fact, Greener was just going to be the overarching company, and Riva, which was the electric car brand, was really the brand that we were going to be pushing. That was there was no mention of bikes when we started, and in fact, it came a little bit not by accident, but we were constantly trying to kind of find better ways to promote and to stay relevant with a little electric car. And one winter, remember walking into an e-bike shop in Paris. We were just visiting friends, and it happened to be a manufacturer, and obviously an e-bike shop, there wasn't many around. And the guys showed us like a little folding electric bike, and just tried it out and think, okay, that actually fits in the back of that electric car that we have. That would be the perfect range extender. It would make sense to kind of where you can't park, that you drop it a little bit on the outskirts, you unfold your e-bike and you go to work or whatever. So that's how we started with the e-bikes. And then we just quickly realized, first of all, it wasn't as much of a commitment for people to purchase. You didn't have, the insurance side, registration. Everything was a little bit of a complicated task for an unknown brand, which was the Riva, where the electric bikes didn't need any of that. Like people were quite happy to take a more modest risk that they could instantly see themselves liking it, because there's this we call it the electric smile. Anyone that goes for the first time on an e-bike is just like transformed. The experience itself, does the talking. You don't need to say much more. You say, okay, well, this is the feeling you could be getting on a daily basis, going to work, rather than just be part of the traffic problem and furious because someone is not gunning it at the red light, the way you would want to. So and also the bike front, like in Belgium where I'm from, it's not something that you kind of question because it's there. It's a bit like Holland or Denmark, it's part of the culture. And until you go into a non-bike centric culture, which Ireland had become a total motordom. So you just realize something is amiss here. Like, I'm used to just go and go from one place to the other and without the complications of parking, of traffic and so on. It suddenly also becomes like a fairly obvious miss. And we were very keen to bring about that change. So, and be part of that. So we thought in many ways, like the e-bike was a better proposition than the electric car, and so it sort of evolved naturally from there. But to go back to the point you just made, it is all about passion, because I think you can look at it different ways. You can just decide, okay, the project isn't working, let's just like call it quits and start something again. Or you just say, okay, well, the fundamental idea is there. We haven't really shaped it the proper way. Let's rebounce and refine, which is what we did. I think if you're passionate for a project, you have to accept that it can change, it can evolve, but I always say there's various different ways to cook an egg, and that's exactly what's happened, or that seems to happen with all the projects that we undertake. Is that you come up with the idea of a business plan is one thing, but the reality is another. And then nowadays reality evolves even faster. So your ability to bounce and adjust and keep this kind of blind faith. Well, you don't have to be too blind, but this kind of core belief that you have a vision and it's going to materialize, but it might not materialize the way you had intended to initially is very important. I think that's the difference between a money opportunity that either realizes itself or it doesn't, and then you decide to call it quits or you don't. I think in this case, we just have a real profound interest for what we do. We've seen countless amount of customers, or thousands of them, that have seen their lives changed for different reasons, but always positive. And I think for me that's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of it because there's better margin industries out there from where I stand. There's easier ways to make money, but when it comes to purpose and being in the right place, it does feel right. It's a problem at the moment because the industry has gone through a real roller coaster.
How so?
Post-pandemic. Well, long story short, basically the pandemic created this crazy artificial demand because people were bored and they just couldn't do much, so they started buying a lot of bikes. Except the supply had completely stopped because of the very pandemic. So you had this artificially blown demand and very little supply to match that demand. All the manufacturers then slowly ramped up their production capabilities, thinking, okay, this is the new normal. We don't know how long COVID's going to last for, but definitely the world has discovered the joys of cycling and e-cycling, and let's make sure that we're ready to match the demand. The problem is there's a cycle, and it took 2 years really for them to ramp up. By that time, COVID was done and over with. You kind of rely on certain key suppliers. So, for example, a few brands would not be able to release their models until they have that key components that they share collectively. And so when they do get it, they swamp the market with all these products because they just can't hold on to them, and they need to see cash on their side. And suddenly you had like an over inventory in the market with bike stores who are traditionally not very well capitalized, and a demand that was suddenly dwindling because people bought during the pandemic and they would have probably not bought if it hadn't been the pandemic. Now that market was sort of sold, so you needed to find a new market because there's no feel good about buying twice within 3 years. They're important purchases, right? So there's been a lot of that, and unfortunately every step of the value chain has been affected. So from the kind of it started with some of the dealers, and then some distributors, some producers, some manufacturers. So it's a great reset. You also have competition from the Far East, but with really kind of low level stuff that is given so that the industry a bad perception to the person looking from the outside looking in, thinking, okay, well, what's the difference? Because I can't really tell. So there's a mix of conditions. I still believe it's a complete mega trend. It's been recognized as such, but you need to kind of surf the tricky waves in the interim, and that's what we're all doing at the moment. Is just to kind of really stay ahead, be more clever, have stronger partnerships with brands if you can, so that they really feel you're the front line to some of those brands, and you're doing the hard yards, and they need to know they can rely on you to sell. So it's very hard for the very small guys. it's very hard for the very big ones because some are sitting on inventory that is worth over over 100 million. I know one brand that has over 100 million deficit on the,
Wow.
on the balance sheet for e-bikes. So it's a tricky time, but again, it's a mega trend in the sense that that's where cities are going.
Yes.
That's where people actually have the narrative has changed. People accept that that the cities have been made more cyclable. They also are considering those purchases that they didn't before. So you can't reverse on that. I think that's where the differences are. Like in the States, you have a lot of cities that were really designed around car centricity, and then some are just adjusting, and that's where you see the massive contrast in demand. Your market is still newcomers, which is great. You're still talking to somebody about, well, many sales are people, well, I was considering buying a car, and then this seems to really be adding up, and my neighbor was telling me about it and he's raving about it, and I just thought at least I need to give it a go, and that's the job done. But so it has this kind of ripple effect is there, and it's large enough to withstand a total counter movement, because it's just the most practical, fun, healthy way to get around. But so that's the industry in a nutshell at the moment.
That's very interesting.
And it's kind of worldwide.
Yeah. And so how do you, because you mentioned, it's a little bit challenging for certain businesses, but there is still the demand and it's growing. And I can definitely see the future of electronic bicycles. For you, how do you differentiate your brand from others, right? From competitors? Because I assume there are other people in the market that also sell e-bikes. So what makes you different? How do you promote that? How do you market that?
Yeah, so well, I'll say in Ireland, what we did is that we started and we focused from the get-go exclusively on the e-bikes. So we were very much kind of identified to be the experts on the topic. So what the years of trading have taught us is quite simple: is that you pay for quality. So we are linked with quality as a brand. People come to us knowing that it's not a race to the bottom, and that's very important. We also know that we can command certain prices with what we deem the best brands to be, and we take the narrative as far as we can away from pricing. And more about the use case, the requirements, and the value addition of expertise and after sales abilities. This has been the journey for Green Air for the last couple of years, and I think it's somehow a bit more sheltered from all the complications of all the bike stores that were not touching e-bikes out of fundamental beliefs that it was for cheaters. Suddenly we're forced into it, and then suddenly now you have everyone because the brands are pushing e-bikes, because the e-bike side for them is the lucrative side. So for normal bike brands, right? So there's a notion of offers, both physical, online, and mixed. And I think the pure player sort of message that we have from the get-go sort of stands for us. People know what to expect, and it's the nice thing about being a slightly larger fish in a smaller pond is that there's recognition in that and trust. And a brand that we decide to put under our umbrella tends to be, we can sell it because we've curated it, and that's the message. Like, people come to us, they know that we'll understand their needs probably better than most other outfits. I'm not saying that out of being patronizing or anything. It's just our experience. We've just focused on this from the get-go. So there's no confused message as to, do I do road biking, do I do mountain bike? No, it's one, it's a very clear niche that we've gone after, and that's why I'm saying the cargo bike is a huge part of it. And so we really don't think there's any necessity for somebody to go elsewhere if we have all the best panels of brands curated, and it's just a matter of selecting the right one. And we also have exclusive arrangements, which is a big thing for us.
Yes, I can definitely also relate to what you said regarding the shift to e-bikes and how people perceive that. Because I remember a couple of years ago, I had a friend, he got an e-bike, and we used to call him a cheater. It's like, oh, you're too lazy to bike and this and that, right? And now it's normal. People, I certainly don't look at that anymore, because you can go further, you can preserve energy. It's easier to use because you don't have that level of resistance when, let's say you live on a hill and you got a bike, in Norway at least, you got a lot of hills and mountains. He had to go down and then back up. And it's like, I can understand the benefit of having that, because you still have to pedal, right? It's not like it's a scooter. You still have to pedal, but you get that additional traction. And so when he goes uphill, it's easier for him to go from point A to B. And also, you mentioned that the business, really, you've established yourself sort of as an expert in your business because you've had this focus since day one, on the customer, on the experience. And, you've had this now for many years. Throughout this journey, Ollie, what is one thing that you've taken away in terms of leadership, in terms of building this business? What are some valuable lessons that you've learned along the way?
Well, there's plenty. I would say out of all the marketing techniques, never underestimate when it comes to retail, or what we do is the power of the word of mouth. I would say that in terms of acquisition, acquisition costs of someone completely neutral versus somebody that's heard through a third party, trusted third party, is just always going to be that's what makes us human. I think I think there's a human centricity to what we do, which is on the one side problematic because it's an imperfect. We have a very human business, but you have to think of, from a retailer point of view, in a day where it's all about like hybrid channels and online and offline and so on. You have to justify your existence as a brick and mortar outfit. So you need to add value wherever you can, and that means in the way you greet, in the way you follow up, in the way you understand needs, in the way you share your own expertise, in the way you satisfy expectation. And it's tough, and it's very tough, but doing all these basics right and being able to monetize without losing track of the bottom figures that need to add up is the simple lesson for us. You have to just make sure that the market is satisfied with what you bring, and so you have to keep listening, even if it doesn't, if you lose a little bit the run of yourself, you have to be able to listen to what's the word on the street. So I've always been very lucky to be able to call on advisors that were just doing that from a pure benevolent aspect. So where it is customers or friends that have a business savvy, I think it's very important. It's a very lonesome, and that's for any entrepreneurship sort of journeys, but it is a lonesome one. And to be able to surround yourself with people of good intentions that you respect and trust the judgment of is very comforting. So I would say that's a big lesson, and I would even double down on that from an early stage, because at the end of the day, you're always gonna. I mean, I always trusted with Lisa. We've always trusted our guts and our core instinct. But again, there's different ways to go about things, and it's important to have sounding boards for ideas. And whether you listen or you don't, at least you're enriched with an external point of view.
Yeah.
Then the other big lesson, and this is more for the industry that we're in, is that it's wonderful because it's full of hobbyists, of passionate people. But you have to, unfortunately, really look at the hard numbers, even if it's a passion, because if you want it, like the sustainability side extends to financial sustainability of a project. And so you could be, presenting the best products and offering the best service, but you don't charge for it, and the cost structure escalates. And the next thing is you're in the red and in danger because you've decided to be a market pleaser, but you haven't looked at the hard numbers of what it takes to stay in business. And so it's a fine balance, and I would say it's a harder balance in our industry because it was started with people who just they just love what they do. They love the activity of it. That doesn't mean that everyone is qualified to be a good business manager. So if you don't have that streak, you need to be able to outsource part of it to people that are able to do that for you, and recognize that it's an important element. So Like I'll just give you a simple example, but when you're servicing, for example, I mean, everyone is always delighted to be able to talk to a service provider about their problems and so on. And so you if you take the business owner mentality, then you're like, hold on a second, they've been talking for like 15, 20 minutes. That's 15, 20 minutes I cannot invoice.
Yeah.
They're going to be having another 15, 20 minutes conversation on the handback.
Yeah.
That's another 20 minutes. So all of a sudden you're invoicing for work, but really it costs you a lot more. And they're little things, but the ability for that very person to upsell because it's needed or not makes a difference. So all these little niggly things that seem very obvious, they need to be looked at. And that's why I love also B2B, because B2B has none of those. It's much more black and white. It's like, go and do that. That's to be fixed. Let me know when it's done.
Yeah.
And here's your in.
Yeah.
So we really have both sides, and that's the next lesson. Is we're very happy to be able to not put all our eggs in one basket. So the fact that we have the B2B that supports the B2C, if one trend sort of emerges stronger than the other at times, there's a seasonality aspect where they both kind of work very well together. Because the B2B is not the same seasonality at all.
Yeah.
Like it's more of a steady runner for fleet management and servicing and so on. So where the retail side is kind of, you're more dependent on customer confidence, the weather. There's different things that there are different parameters that often are kind of hard to control, times hard to predict. So yeah, like splitting the risk is a good one.
A lot of valuable lessons there. I think one of the big ones that I think is going to be very key for a lot of people is, what you said about number one, listen, right? Listen to your customers, listen for feedback. And you also mentioned, talking, sharing things with advisors, with friends, getting that input. A lot of the times, people just keep things to themselves, at least most often in the early stages of entrepreneurship. But I think this is such an important thing to continuously ask for feedback, but also, most importantly, your customer, which is the person who's buying your product, right? Those are the ones that is going to give direct feedback. This is what we want. This is what we like. Talking about customers, right? Because your products are, compared to regular bicycle. I mean, if people want a regular bike, they could buy one for probably 50 euros, 100 euros, maybe 500 euros if they want a little bit better one. The e-bikes are a bit more pricey, right? I mean, they're what's the range? Between 3 and 7, or?
Well, actually, we on the B2B side, we would go up to 17,000 euros, and on the normal starting points, B2C would be between sort of 3,000 and 10,000.
And how do you then convert customers, right, leads into buying clients on such premium products? What's that process like? Is it hard? Have you, what's that process like?
Well, I think it's not really a shotgun approach. It's more a fairly a screened approach where you really try to get the qualified leads. There's no point of trying to talk to everybody because you know that your market isn't everybody. So it's about trying to be quite understanding of where your niche is and how to best communicate with them. So we've always been kind of very hard. We've pushed quite hard online to kind of, use the landing pages, and those landing pages were full of long series of questions, which can be sort of an obstacle for people. But we think, okay, if you're already in that conversation, you're not going to mind answering over 10 questions about your needs so that we can follow up with not a generic suggestion, but, improve straight away get to the next level of a conversation and pre-screen. So we have very much an online to offline approach to things. Really, we try to capture people online and get them to physically come into our stores. We do a lot of appointment basis. So that's another thing, is when people book an appointment, even though that it's not a financial transaction, but it's already a commitment. And in their heads, the fact that they're kind of booked in for Saturday at 2 p.m., it actually progresses the buying process in their head without them knowing. So they just know that they're already one step further in that whole thing. They're going to be going with the family at a particular time where some sales advisor will be waiting for them, equipped with information about their needs. It it pushes it forward, the whole conversation. It's not it's much more qualified, right?
Yes.
So the conversion eventually is higher
Yeah.
because you've already set the expectations on price. You've already trying to explain differences. Then now you're going to validate it by having the whole family, if it's a cargo bike, to agree with one over the other because of such and such criteria. But yeah, the experiential side is very important on that front. And then we really want to be strong on the follow-up. So generally speaking, we don't have a high footfall because the locations are kind of destinations. They're not. We don't need to be high street vendors. Like it doesn't really make sense, like we would spend a lot of time talking to a lot of unqualified leads. So we prefer to just be able to give the quality of time to the right sort of potential customers.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're really sniping at the right type of client instead of wasting the resources on unqualified people and trying to make them aware and then having to go through that whole process of with them. So, Ollie, now you've had your business again for more than a decade here. What's your vision? Because you're obviously not going to slow down, right? You're going to keep this going. You're going to keep building. What's your vision for the next 5-10 years? Do you have a grand, like, this is what I want to achieve?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer, to be honest, simply because we have been going through a bit of a roller coaster. So it was all about kind of batten down the hatches and make sure that we're sustained as a business. Now we see that the horizon is a bit more clear. Well, in Ireland it's simple. We just want to be really covering the whole of the country with more stores and have a full network that can be used to deploy even more B2B offers. Because in other words, like having more stores in different geographical locations mean that you can approach a nationwide customer to say, look, why don't we do a nationwide rollout and we can address all your needs on that front. So one helps the other. And so this is the path that we're on for the next few years, is to add more stores and to consolidate the proposition, really to sort of have a very solid proposition nationwide on that. And then obviously there's the Spanish project is a different one. The vision for the B2B is going to be, the B2B side can be rolled out internationally because we've gathered a lot of experience on that, because we have the contract for the postal services, and we've been servicing and been able to work out the ins and out of that. So I have a feeling that leasing, so the more and more we will have to roll out products the way the automotive industry rolls out products to their customers, and give ourselves the tools to do so that if you go in the street, you see a lot of cars that are worth maybe 100,000 euros, but if it was down to it, there would be very few customers who could shell out the initial 100,000 euros to buy it, and yet that's what we sort of expect in the bike industry. So we need to just give all these opportunities, these options to people as they consider electric bikes more and more as a transport alternative to a car. So yeah, to go back to the grand vision, I would say with Green Air, the idea is that definitely to double in size within sort of 5 to 7 years. And that means having outposts through like everywhere where it's justifiable. And the B2B is the kind of, I would say, it's the big X, because you can suddenly get a very large contract and it changes completely the full picture. So that's quite exciting. The products for B2B are really getting exciting too. Like we just brought in this Estonian four-wheeler with a windshield and everything. Like it is like a super cool vehicle. It's called a VOC, and there's four wheels, 4 motors, so one in each wheel. Like super fun to ride. You can ride in the bike in the bike lanes. It's a definite alternative to wide vans and deliveries. Fantastic support for a brand if they want to show that they're doing things differently. So you can totally see cities facilitating these sort of solutions over any of the old traditional ones, and suddenly see markets kind of really grow on that. I think we're very well placed with regards to these solutions, and it's hard to put a figure on what's going to happen and how long it's going to take. But again, I think it's one of those trends, and it's part of this whole cargo bike. So there, I've said it probably 3 times in this conversation.
Yeah,
but
you
it's
love the cargo bikes.
The beauty of that we call ourselves the home of the game changers, and really, the cargo bike is the game changer as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I'm gonna start calling you Ollie Cargo Bike.
Yeah, you can. That's it won't be too far off. I mean, I live on one, so it's okay.
That's amazing, man. Your vision is beautiful, and I think that it's also important because health is going to be key, right? I mean, not to digress, but I've seen health decline generally in society, and I think this is such a great contributor to combating that in a very low. It's not hard for people to get on an e-bike and get a little bit more exercise in. So for any aspiring out there who wants to start something themselves, do you have any piece of advice for them?
Yeah, I would say, well, there's different contexts, right? But if you're talking to kind of young budding entrepreneurs, find ways that you can bounce those ideas with anyone. You will find that people are really happy to give their time. It's a very stupid thing, but if you want to be the next, I don't know, like any big disruptor, I would never kind of shy away from like going to the biggest player in the market and just say, hey, would you have 10 minutes? I'd love to talk to you about my idea. And I think more often than not, you'll be surprised the amount of people that love a refreshed view on something and will be willing to help without concessions. Because companies, I mean, if someone comes to me, I'd be quite happy sharing ideas. Nothing is rocket science, but it's just having the ideas is one thing, but it's really hard to implement those ideas that it's complicated. And so I would always advise anyone to just kind of think through how you're going to get this idea to market, and don't sort of ignore the big elephants, the big challenges, but rather just saying, okay, these are the challenges, how I'm going to get around that, and what are the options. And once you have that idea fairly clear, then just share it with a few people that you feel you can trust, or maybe achieve some successes in whatever fields, but they have good common sense, because business is common sense, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you can learn it in many different ways, and it doesn't have to be university, by the way. I actually think you can teach so much or learn so much just by self-educating. So yeah, I would just go that way. Just like make sure that you think it through, and then once it's ripe, just have a few sounding boards, and then if it's overall positive, then just go for it. If you feel like you can take the risk, take it, because you won't regret it.
Yeah.
There's 2 schools of thoughts on this. There's obviously those who just say, look, why don't you just work in a big corporates and get a bit of a sense of the ways and of the ways of the industry. And, you could argue you can do that. The problem that I see with that is unless you're very clear on the fact that you're going to pursue your idea. I have seen a lot of people saying, well, I've been keeping this thing in the back of my mind for a couple of years, but every time I was about to leave, the company gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. And then, I got hitched, and then the kids came along, and now I'm in the package. Look, it's not it's not the greatest job, but it pays the bills, and I'm able to play golf on the weekend.
Yeah.
So it's perfectly okay for a lot of people to live that way. But if you feel this kind of fire inside that you just want to do your own thing, in a world where everything becomes very samey, I think you owe it to yourself to explore that side of yourself.
That's amazing, man. Thank you so much. If people ever want to talk to you about any ideas, where can they reach you?
Yeah, well, the easiest is probably just on my LinkedIn. So it's Olivier van der Elst, and I'd be completely happy to chat with anyone if I can be of any use, or I'm a good connector at times when there's good ideas, but that look to have a sounding platform that I'm not very qualified for. I often know other people.
Yes. Well, Ollie, thank you so much for joining today. It was a pleasure speaking to you, man. Thank you.
It was a pleasure, Darren. Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care.